In Honkai Star Rail, we have 7 playable paths, with each of them defining what a character within that path is meant to do. And if you go to the character screen and click this button right here, you get to see all these in-game descriptions. Harmony characters applies buffs to allies to improve teams' combat capacities. Abundance characters heals allies and restores HP to the team. Now, while Hoyo have been mostly following these guidelines that they themselves set, as we've been getting more characters, we've slowly started seeing more kits that are a bit more creative and some outliers. For example, we have Akron, who is a Nihility character, and while she does play around debuffs, she functions completely like a traditional DPS character. Destruction characters are ones that are listed as possessing great survivability, and if we look at Imbibe de Lune and Jingyu, they have pretty much none of that in their kits at all. And honestly, this is a good thing. If Hoyo just completely stayed stuck to the descriptions they decided at the start of the game, a lot of character kits would be very similar to each other and it would get boring pretty quickly. Now let's move on to why you came here, the hunt path. Now the in-game description of the hunt path is for characters that deals extraordinary amounts of single target damage, and they are the main damage dealers against elite enemies. Now this is mostly true. Every hunt character we have in the game currently, they all do primarily single target damage. There isn't a single one that even has an ounce of blast in their kit. The problem with hunt is if you look at the game modes and the endgame content within Star Rail, there isn't one where hunt characters are preferred over just running destruction or erudition. Currently, we have 3 endgame game modes with MOC, Pure Fiction, and Apocalyptic Shadow. MOC was our first one, and while hunt characters are perfectly fine and can easily clear, slowly we've seen that it's much more beneficial to run someone that runs blast damage, which is most of our destruction characters. Pure Fiction is a full AoE game mode where you just need to clear through waves, so this was brought in to help our erudition characters, where characters like Herda and Himiko weren't performing too well in MOC, and now they had a stage where they could shine. Now Apocalyptic Shadow, when it first got announced, a lot of people, including myself, thought that this would be the game mode that finally helps out our hunt characters, and it would just be your team versus a single boss, and you just have to do as much damage as possible. Now it did end up being boss fight, it's a singular boss on each side, but unfortunately they decided to gear this more towards break characters rather than just hunt. So instead of seeing the comeback of characters like Yanqing, Sealer, instead we saw the newest characters like Boot Hill, Firefly, and Ranmei get a big push. And even if you didn't play into Break, which you kind of can't for both sides because of Break's reliant on Ranmei, you would want to run an AoE character because of how summons work. Every boss we've seen in Apocalyptic Shadow has summons that need to be cleared for you to start doing damage to the main target. Cocolia has her summons with her ice pillars, but also Japad is present in the fight. Argenti has his shield things that even taunt you until you kill them. In the most recent Apocalyptic Shadow that just came out, even Kafka, who normally doesn't have summons when you fight her, has 2 elites next to her that need to be killed before her break bar gets exposed. So right now, while hunt characters aren't terrible, in fact some of them are pretty good still, they don't really have a stage for them to truly shine. Now if we look at the hunt characters in the game currently, to me at least, and I think most people would agree, there's one character that stands out as aging the best over time despite being released relatively early, and that character is Topaz. Unlike pretty much every other hunt character other than March, and we'll get to her in a little bit as she's going to be the main focus of this video, Topaz works more as a sub DPS with a bit of nihility in her kit. It feels like almost every patch Topaz gets a little bit better, and this is simply because you slot her in, she's fully skill point positive, she does reasonable damage, and she also debuffs the enemy, increasing follow-up damage for the team. Now in that same vein, I think Hoyo saw what they did with Topaz and saw it as a success and decided to do something very similar with the new March 7th. March is by no means a main DPS character, and while you can play her as one, she works much better as a sub DPS who does very decent amounts of damage in the team while also giving another DPS character in your team a lot of crit damage and a decent amount of speed. And with March's release, I think Hoyo have finally revealed what they're going to do with the hunt path from now on. I think a lot of hunt characters that come out in the future, most of them are going to play into follow-ups, and a good portion of them within that are going to be more like Topaz and March, where they're sub DPS characters that either have buffing for your teammates or debuffs on the enemies. This way it's going to be a lot easier for Hoyo to balance these characters, as you obviously want the newest characters to be the strongest ones, but if they're going to be a hunt character, you kind of need them to one-shot enemies just so that they can compete with the stronger destruction or erudition characters. Now if they are more of a supportive hunt character, then this damage output isn't very necessary. you can put a lot more of the power in these characters into their utility. So for example, March does pretty good damage, but isn't necessarily game changing. She isn't going to one-shot everything, but she's fully skill point positive, which is a great thing for a lot of teams. She gives her Shifu, so that character she's buffing, up to 10% speed and also 60% crit damage. Making these units provide more utility as well also lets them be useful in scenarios where a single target DPS won't cut it. So for example, other than Sealer, who is a very unique character in the hunt path, none of the other hunt characters are playable at all in pure fiction. But for Topaz, she actually has moments of brilliance. There have been certain pure fiction stages where there's been elite enemies that have been fire weak, and there's also a turbulence that benefits follow-up attackers. In stages like this, you could pair Topaz with someone like Himiko, where Himiko would clear all the waves, while Topaz acts as both a support in debuffing the enemies from follow-up damage, but also just sticks onto the elite enemy in each wave. Now we do have 2 hunt characters coming out very soon, which we can absolutely check this on. Fei Xiao, I think, is going to fall into that category of just being a generic DPS because she is a Shanzhou general and she does have the title of being the Merlin's Claw, so I think making her more of a supportive style hunt character would be a little weird. Moza, on the other hand, who is a 4-star character, definitely could fall into that category. So basically, unless Hoyoverse genuinely does have a hunt game mode in the pipeline with full boss fights that don't even include summons at all, I think a lot of hunt characters are slowly going to see more supportive stuff in their kit to make it easier for Hoyo to balance these characters without abandoning the identity of being single target damage dealers. Okay, now that we've talked about what I think the future of the hunt is, let's talk about March more specifically and how she feels currently to play. And I'm going to be brutally honest, I think March playing with a crit build can't really perform that well unless you have Robin. Since March in a crit build generally wants to play with another DPS character so she can give them that 60 crit damage buff, we only have 2 Harmony units that really shine in dual DPS, and those are going to be Robin and Ranmei. Now Ranmei does provide a lot of amazing buffs, but with the teams that I was trying, it felt like I was really missing out from the stuff that Robin would be giving. Firstly, we have March's follow-up from her E2. Now this follow-up does not do very much damage at all. It does little less than 10k with Ranmei's buffs, and it's more used to just farm March's stacks. Now if we throw Robin in the mix, this follow-up now gets pushed a lot higher because of Robin's own personal damage from her ult. So now instead of having this 5 to 10k damage hit coming every time March does her follow-up attack, instead it gets pushed up to a 20k, which is damage that you definitely can't ignore. Now we also have the advance forward from Robin. Now, March wants her Shifu, or the character she's buffing, to attack a lot so she can get a lot of stacks herself. So having an advance forward in the team is really useful. And this is a team-wide advance forward as well, so March herself gets to funnel her own enhanced basic attack. So just from looking around on YouTube and stuff from other people playing March, I wasn't able to find a March, Topaz, Ranmei, Aventurine team do that much better than what I did, which was around a 6-cycle clear for both sides of MOC. Now, when I saw people playing her with Robin, there were a lot better clears, mostly around the 3 to 4 cycle mark. And this is purely anecdotal, and if you have had success with crit build March with a Ranmei team, let me know in the comments and I'll definitely check it out. But so far, I haven't been finding much success with crit build March using Ranmei as my buffer because I don't have Robin. Now, in Apocalyptic Shadow, it was a lot better. Apocalyptic Shadow does favor Ranmei a lot more because the break effect is very useful against the bosses that you're fighting, so I was easily able to get above 3300 with March, the same March team that I used in MOC. Now, the other way you can play March is Super Break, and if you don't have Robin and you have Ranmei, I think you're going to find a lot more success playing this style instead of the crit one. You slot her in the exact same team that you would normally put Firefly in, so with Ranmei, Harmony MC, and Gallagher, and you use that skill on Gallagher because he'll be able to generate a lot of stacks for March, and you'll also be able to do fire break damage as well. I found a lot more success playing this team in MOC and also Apocalyptic Shadow, but Apocalyptic Shadow once again favors break a lot more, so that was pretty much expected. And also for players who aren't really that endgame yet and maybe are a bit newer, March is going to be a pretty good quote-unquote harmony unit for your teams. If you've been only working with like Ting Yun, Pella, and maybe like Asta or Hanya, you could also throw March in the mix and she might perform pretty well. It's not going to be optimal and you're always probably going to prefer the 5-star harmonies if you have them, but if you don't, you could throw her in and experiment a bit, and you never know what might work. So overall, I do think March is still a really good character, and you should probably build her. She's completely free, and she's very flexible and can get slotted into a lot of different teams. But if you don't have Robin and are looking to play into a crit style, I would lower your expectations a bit, considering I do see a lot of people hyping her up a lot. If you want to play her break style, which I think is a bit better if you don't have Robin, she will be really strong. But if you do have another break character like Firefly and Boothill, it will be a bit hard to play them both at the same time, since they do require very similar teammates.